I'll give you a little bit more detail of what qualifies me to be here today. I was actually the CIO and the CISO at G4S. If you haven't heard of us, a small security company, operating in 129 countries, 625,000 employees globally. The part of the business that I looked after really honed security. So I looked after the hostile, complex parts of the world. It was described to me as hot and sandy, which sounded really cool. Then they told me it was Iraq, Afghanistan, Sudan, Somalia. So believe me, nothing focuses your mind when you're given a tin hat, body armor, a weapon, and you're crying in the bottom of a vehicle when you've gone to one of these places, because I'm a civilian, or ex-civilian. So I've been asked to come and talk a little bit about the Internet of Things, or the Internet of Theft, as I call it. You'll be pleased to hear I'm not going to talk about any products. I'm not going to do a pitch from Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, which is unusual for a vendor, I know. I'm going to start with a quick video, because I think this video sort of sums up where we are. I'm not going to use it as fear, uncertainty, and doubt, but it gives you an idea of the sorts of things the bad guys are doing. And then I'm going to talk about a little bit about what we see in the marketplace, and I'm going to talk about things you can do to actually protect yourself as a citizen and as an organization. There's two reports I'm going to refer to a lot. If you haven't seen them, I suggest you download them or talk to my colleagues on the stand. The first one is the Ponemon Global Cost of Cybercrime. Really talks about, what's the impact financially, how is that changing year on year, and this is the 6th year, I believe, that particular report has been done, and it covers various parts of the globe. The other report that I'm going to talk a little bit about is the Hewlett-Packard Enterprise Cyber Risk Report. Talks a little bit more around the types of techniques, what the bad guys are doing, and what we're seeing in terms of the shift of their different parts of them attacking us as individuals.
Ieder van ons heeft naast zijn gewone leven vandaag de dag ook een online leven. Mag ik je voorstellen, mijn nieuwste vriend, Tom de Grote. Tom zit sinds 2010 op Facebook. Hij heeft bijna 700 friends, waaronder sinds kort ik dus. Hij is 35 en woont sinds jaar en dag in Brugge. Daar heeft hij ook Sophie leren kennen. Zijn het geen schatjes? We stuurden hem een phishing-mail, zogezegd in naam van zijn echte bank, met de vraag om enkele gegevens te bevestigen. Eens door die hebben volstaat nog 1 neptelefoontje om zo zijn rekening leeg te halen. Maar ik ben iets anders van plan. Want intussen ken ik Tom immers zo goed dat ik niet zijn bankrekening ga overnemen, maar zijn leven. Letterlijk. Tot snel, Tom. Zo, begint men intussen al goed in zijn vel te voelen. Tijd voor een testje. Ja, we gaan eens dag zeggen aan Krieke, de baas van zijn stamcafé. Daar is Tom kind aan huis, dus ik ook. Toch?
Hé, Krieke! Wes!
Benieuwd hoe hij zal reageren als hij zichzelf, of beter gezegd mij, tegenkomt op Facebook.
Maar Tom?
Good afternoon, sir. Sorry to bother you. This is Jimmy from the Harp Hotel in London.
Yeah?
Yeah, we got your online reservation for 4 rooms.
Excuse me. I didn't make a reservation.
Een paar dagen geleden heb ik online mijn kinderdroom gevonden. Een schitterende antieke harp. Maar ik heb hem natuurlijk niet betaald. Daar heb je vrienden voor.
Ah, dag meneer de Grote. Terug.
Ja?
Staat hij daar goed?
Wat is dat?
Wat lief?
Wat is dat?
Dat is die harp die ik hier juist geleverd heb voor u. Tom, je hebt hier juist getekend.
En waar is mijn handteken?
Hier?
Hey, maar dat... Kijk, gisteren had er al een gebeld vanuit Londen dat er met mijn Visa-kaart dingen besteld zijn.
Ja, dat weet ik niet. Ik weet dat ik hier gewoon dit hier heb afgeleverd. Je hebt hier juist afgetekend.
Wat heb ik niet zo getekend? Meen je dat?
Ja?
En wie was dat? Hoe zag die man eruit?
Dat waarde jij, simpel.
Ja, zeg, dat wordt ik weet ook wel wat dat eruit ziet. Ben ik hier niet geweest? Je mag ook weer meenemen, dat ik je dat niet vragen.
Ja, maar ik mag die niet meenemen.
Dat... Ja, wat hè? Kijk, dan ben ik vrij.
Wacht. Is dat deze?
Ja?
Beste Tom, Tom hier. Aangenaam. Heel je leven staat online en voor je het weet neemt iemand zoals ik het van je over.
Hé, maar dat is freaky. Dat is freaky.
Deel geen persoonlijke en bankaire informatie. Of jij wordt misschien de volgende.
Okay, so that was quite extreme. But the point of that is the bad guys aren't just after organizations. You know, they're after enterprises, yes, but they're also after you and me in the room as individuals. So we know that the bad guys are attacking industries, they're attacking countries, they're attacking individuals. I believe there's two types of organizations. So I don't believe it's if you're going to be attacked, it's when. You know? So there's two types of things we can do to protect ourselves, but to be able to do that effectively, it really needs a complete change of mindset. You know, traditional security has all been about saying no. It's about locking things down. It's about making things complex. My belief is security should actually enable. We need to innovate. We need to help work with our organizations to deliver value. Yeah? We need to also think about the language that we use. So what I thought I'd do is I'd start to share some of the research that is available out on the market. And one of the really interesting things is the media are very good at talking about very large attacks. They're really good at talking about big denial of service attacks. But the reality is that the bad guys are generally using a mixture of both social engineering, so learning about you, and technology. So if you're going to effectively protect yourselves against the bad guy, just focusing on the technology isn't good enough. You need to also look at the social side, you know, individuals, people. These are the stats in terms of the top 10, US compared to Europe. Let's try and personalise that a little bit more for us in Scotland. So this was something that was in the paper, I believe it was yesterday or the day before. Some really interesting statistics here, and the ones I wanted to point out was 53% of small businesses in Scotland believe that it's unlikely, or very unlikely, they're going to be a target of attack. That was interesting. What was more interesting, though, was only 23% of them felt they were actually prepared. So although they didn't believe they were going to be attacked, very few of them are actually preparing. And what was more worrying was this 19% who've taken no steps at all to protect themselves. So on a daily basis, I talk to CIOs and CISOs of very large organizations and very small organizations. And what I commonly hear is, I've got nothing to steal. I'm not going to be an attack. The reality of that is things are changing. It's no longer the schoolboy in their bedroom. These are professionalized organizations and outfits out to steal something that belongs to you as a citizen or you as a company. So every year we do some statistics and we talk to customers and we talk to clients, and these are some of the findings. I'm not going to talk about all of the findings. The ones I really want you to focus on is this number here. This is the average cost of a breach, according to Ponemon, across all of the customers that they talk to. $7.7 million. That's growing year on year. So last year it was $6.9 million. I'm not saying every breach is this large. I mean, some are a lot smaller, some are much, much bigger. We've seen 60, 70, $80 million losses. So the number's pretty bad, but we're only spending a small amount of our overall IT spend on security. So according to Gartner and IDC, they believe about 3.8% is the average spend on security. I had exactly the same challenge when I was in technology and when I was the CIO, I was actually spending about 2.8 to 3.5% of my overall security or budget on security. How could I possibly go to my board and say, security is really important to me? So this is the technique that I actually did. I started to look at my budget overall, and because I was a CIO, I could look holistically. And I said, actually, I've got things that are in the wrong area at the moment. So my data center budget, for example, was in infrastructure. Is the data center not protecting your critical assets in the center? Well, it is. So I moved that into security. I then started looking at mail. Mail is protecting my critical communications within my organization. So I moved that into security. After I'd gone through that exercise without changing anything, I moved from 3 or 4% up to 56% of my overall spend was on security. I was then able to go to the board and have a proper grown-up conversation saying, look, it's more than 50% of what I'm spending my money on. It's critical to us as a business. And I started to have a conversation of one less of cost, but one of contribution. And how I did that was by having questions and understanding the business in business language. We're really good about talking about IDSs, IPSs, techie babble. The business just doesn't get it, often. It is maturing, and the board are getting much better at this, but let's try and help ourselves and talk in business language. Talk about business risk. Yeah? Talk about contribution. Talk about margin. Talk about how IT can enable the business. Experience tells me that it costs significantly less to build and bake security in than try and do it as an afterthought. In my life, when I was doing it as a CIO, it probably cost me 60 to 70% more to lock things down afterwards rather than building it right in at the outset of the project. So actually, looking holistically at your budget, building it in and talking in business language makes it much better and much easier to actually understand how you can deliver things safely and securely. You may have heard of the new EU legislation coming in to protect citizens' privacy across Europe. Lots of people are scared about this. They said it's expensive, we can't do it, we need 28,000 new data privacy or data protection officers in Europe to deliver this. My view is the new GDPR is actually a really good thing. It gives us an opportunity to go back and look at our security holistically, and actually it helps us with our records management, it helps us with going for the budget that we might need to be able to secure our organizations and our citizens better. Some key things coming out of that, if you're not aware. The first one is there is some fines associated with non-compliance, up to 4% of the parent's annual revenue. So we're looking some pretty big numbers there if you're non-compliant. Fortunately, we've got a number of years to get there, so we have to be compliant by April 2018. That isn't long. It's going to come around very quickly. The other scary thing is 72 hours we need to actually tell the authorities that we've had a breach. Do you actually know you've been breached? Do you have the right reporting controls in place to do that? When I talk to CIOs and CISOs, the answer to that one generally is no. They don't know they've been breached, or they haven't got the appropriate processes in place. So I think we need to have a complete shift of our thinking to enable this to happen. So these are the things I would say we need to focus on. Focus on business risk. Talk to the business in a language that they understand. Build protection into everything you do, but see security as enabling. Let's not be the no, we won't be able to do it, or no, it's very expensive people. And security, we have done that in the past. But protecting your privacy of your organization actually is good for business. It helps differentiate you. I genuinely believe that credit reference agencies are going to start using cybersecurity as a way of rating companies or countries. Can you imagine if we started to get a poor credit rating here in the UK? What would that mean? Yeah? How would that affect our ability to be able to do trade? So why is it tough? We've talked about security for quite some time. Well, there's three compelling arguments. The first thing that makes it really difficult for us is the bad guys are becoming more sophisticated. So the previous speaker talked about some of that. The bad guys are actually becoming a professionalized business. So they're looking like every other organization. We're starting to see them build an ecosystem like any other organization. So they've got HR to do recruitment. They've got logistics to make sure that they can get their bad stuff out there. They've got chief financial controllers, make sure the money's coming in. They've got R&D departments to make sure that the code quality that they're providing is good. And we're actually seeing in the market organizations setting up that look legitimate but have a massive return on their investment. So think of the shift. They've moved away from one of disruption to one of monetization. They're starting to use ransomware. They're starting to use malware to actually extract money from us. Yes, they're still going after the $500–600 million opportunities, but actually they're doing lots of very small ones where members of the public are more likely to pay $50–60 or €50–60 to unlock their machine because crypto locker's been put on there and they haven't backed up their data. The second challenge obviously is the new legislation coming in. Which legislation do you have to comply with? Is it relevant to me? You've got Sarbanes-Oxley, you've got ISO 27001, and the list goes on. Many organizations see standards and policies as something that they have to tick a box. It doesn't make you any more secure, but we still have to grapple with those. So my view is a standard is something that you should aim for, but it shouldn't be your minimum place where security needs to stop. And the final one is the changing of the business. We're moving now to an all-digital world. So anytime, any place, anywhere. The business wants it faster, cheaper, and they want to be able to access it anywhere. So think of your mobile phone, for example. The new perimeter is literally in your pocket. Yeah? So, I do a lot of traveling. I use the British Airways app. When I'm accessing it from my mobile phone, I'm literally accessing 18 different cloud services. Are they secure? Yeah? What data am I putting up there? So we really need to think about, as technology develops, it becomes more disruptive, are we doing it and building things in a secure way, in a secure manner? We've obviously got the new Internet of Things, or as I like to call it, the Internet of Theft. Yes, the Internet of connected devices is great for the consumer. It allows us to access things faster. It allows us to get access to data. So we've got connected cars, connected pacemakers. I even had a connected fridge. Really cool because it automatically orders the food when I start to eat the food out of it. It's connected to my home network. Is it safe? Not really, because I really don't want my wife knowing how many beers I'm drinking, how much cake I'm eating when I'm out. You can see I like eating. But actually to the bad guy, it's a great place for them to start attacking my home network, to gain access to my systems. So IDC tell us that this explosion of connected devices is getting larger. So by 2020, and you can see this number many places, but IDC's number is there'll be 28.1 billion connected devices by 2020. So if I'm a bad guy, fantastic. I've got lots of things I can start attacking. So we do some research, and every year we look at the top connected items and connected devices. Last year we looked at security devices intended to protect you in the home. So CCTV, door entry systems, door access systems. Out of those top 10, most of them had significant vulnerabilities. So no encryption. They provided personal information up on the web. Yes, great for the consumer. They enter their credit card details. It automatically gives them an update. But actually, is that protected? Is the passwords complex? Is it stored on the cloud? Is that personal information protected in any way? And the answer to that was generally no. So these are my 6 recommendations for CIOs and CISOs. You'll get a copy of the slide later, so you don't need to scribble them down. But these are the things you need to do. The first one is think about a comprehensive framework. That's not just about IT. It's about technology, it's about people, it's about process as well. You need all 3 to be able to have good security. Conduct a full audit. So make sure you understand what you're actually protecting. Do you value your assets in your business? Most organizations don't really do that. They don't have a thorough understanding of what they have. Bake security into your people and processes. Mobilize. Security isn't just for the IT team. Everybody in the organization should have some responsibility. For me, security is a bit like health and safety. It's the health and hygiene of your infrastructure. We get health and safety. Why do we not do the same for security? Security is for everybody. So remember, your weakest link is the part that the bad guy is going to attack. So if you have third-party suppliers, remember to vet them. Give them the right security as well. Don't accept that they're going to be secure. We see lots of attacks coming from third parties. So, HVAC systems, coffee machines, believe it or not, are the access for the bad guy. And the access by choice, because typically they're not protected. And then the last one is rethink IT's role. IT shouldn't be that draconian, no, we can't do it. It should really help enable the business and be a true business partner. I hate using the word the business, actually, because that puts a barrier. I hate using the word users as well, because users to me sounds like they take drugs. Yeah? So let's start to talk about customers. Let's start to talk about IT being part of the organization, part of the ecosystem. Yeah? So I moved my department when I was in the seat from the dungeon under the building right up into the heart of where the business is, into our operations teams and into our financial teams, really getting to understand the business and how it works and the language it uses. So we talk about the Internet of Things. We know that 2014 was the year of the point-of-sale breach. We saw lots of them, and we continue to see them. We know that 2015 was the year of healthcare. So connected devices, pump makers, etc. We know that we're starting to move to an all-connected world. So we've got connected cars, we've got connected homes. Clearly this is great for the consumer, but what does it do for us as security professionals trying to protect our customers and their critical assets? So here's my prediction for 2016. I think critical national infrastructure is going to be the prime number one place the bad guys are going. And we're already seeing that. We're seeing, lots of attacks on water systems, on power grids. One you might not have thought of is the second one, education. I actually think the bad guys are going to start to target education. Because if we think about it, we have some great people with great research in universities, schools, and colleges. We as enterprises use those to help us build great collateral in big data. We don't always spend security or money on security there. We spend it on the research, on the development. So if I was a bad guy, that's an area I'd start to attack, because it makes a lot of sense to try and infiltrate that massive collective wealth that we've got. And obviously, the Internet of Things. So the question I ask and pose to you is, how is digital disruption going to affect your business? Is it impacting you today? Will it impact you in the future? Okay, some big scary numbers. I know some of you like numbers. So the Ponemon report said that the average time the bad guy was inside your organization, 243 days. That's pretty horrific, actually. So they're inside your organization, on average, and you don't even know about it. That's why the costs are very large. The other really scary thing is down here. The average time to remediate is anywhere between 30 and 45 days. So once you've found them, you've then got to do something about it. When I was in the seat, the thing I was concerned about was this guy, the insider. What are you doing about the insider threat? Not always bad, sometimes trying to be helpful, taking a report home because they're against a deadline, they put it on a USB stick, it's not encrypted, and they leave it on the train. Yeah? Happens a lot. I'll give you a really good example. Traveling to a venue last week, I was sat on a crowded train. On the train, the lady was in the carriage with me. There must have been 70 people. She was booking her holiday on the phone. She very kindly gave me her credit card details, her home address. She told me when she was going on holiday. Yeah? So I wrote it all down, handed it across the desk to her, at which point the colour drained from her face. She said, "Where did you get this from?" It's the basics. So we have to focus on the basics. Yes, you can have big security technology in, but it's about user education, user awareness. We need to do that. But that's an area, it moves up to 70 days with the insider because they know what systems to circumvent. They know how to get into our organization. Okay, so now let's have a look at the HP risk report. So these are the main findings that it had. The first one is the bad guys are shifting their focus. Previously, it was about disruption, it was about being difficult, and actually, if you talk to a lot of CIOs and CISOs, it was about hardening the perimeter. Building a big wall, putting everything inside, and locking it down. The reality is now that the bad guys are not after the firewall anymore, they're after the data. They're out to steal something. Credit cards, personal information, intellectual property. So they're shifting their focus to really attacking the app. So traditional security was to build that big wall. We're seeing a shift in the market. So if you're going to effectively protect your businesses and organizations today, you need to focus on the interactions between the user, the data, and the application. There's no point in building that wall, because make the assumption they're already in. You just probably don't know about it yet. That goes whether it's bring your own disaster, whether it's software as a security threat, whether it's big data, on-premise, off-premise, doesn't actually matter. Focus on the data, understand what's important, protect it. So we need to focus on those interactions and less on the perimeter. Yes, it's important, but use a layered approach. Second one, this is probably not a surprise, and vendors tell you all this time. We've learned absolutely nothing from patching. Microsoft released more patches in 2015 than ever before, and still the bad guys are getting in. Why is that? So we do some research. We work part of the zero-day initiative, and last year there was 500 high-severity vulnerabilities in code. Very interestingly, though, out of the top 10, the majority of them are actually well-known. Yeah? Some of them 2009, 2010. Some of them were actually in Stuxnet. We knew about that. It was well advertised, well communicated. So, yes, you've got to patch. So it's all about the security people patching. But I actually believe that the vendors need to be much more transparent. What's the impact of the patch? What vulnerabilities do they have? And they need to disclose that to us as citizens and individuals. You need to ask them, what vulnerabilities have you got? Yeah? Where do they fit? What's the impact of patching? Monetization of malware is becoming much greater in the bad guys' world, because they can really get to the data faster and quicker. They make a very small investment, only sometimes $2 or $3, but actually their return is massive. So we're seeing 2, 3, 4,000% return on investment. So it's a great business to be in if you're a bad guy. So we know that mobile phones and data is starting to move to the mobile phone. I talked about the British Airways app earlier on. So last year we found out there was 100,000 new Trojans, banking vulnerabilities on mobiles. Yes, Android is still growing, so it grew 153% year on year in terms of new attacks and new threats. What I found really interesting, though, was iOS. Because historically everyone said that the Apple Mac was secure and you don't need to put antivirus on your device. That's not the case. If you think of some of the attacks in the last 12 months, bad guys are now starting to infiltrate the Apple Store. They're starting to put Agtons on there as well. And that's because we're not great at scanning code. We're not great at building and baking security in. So I think one to watch is iOS and some of the other platforms that are coming out. I would always say do not pay ransom, because once you start, they'll keep coming back. And we've had examples of that with customers who have now come onto our books to help them get rid of this problem, but previously they'd paid a ransom. They come back again and again and again. So the best defense against ransomware is a good backup policy. Okay, last finding, then a quick video, and then I've got some things I would like you to listen to after the video if you've fallen asleep at the back. Vendors must get much, much better at providing holistic solutions. Don't keep deploying point solutions. The best way to do good security is to look holistically at your whole posture. Yeah? Build it in, bake it in.
The retailer says the credit card numbers were stolen over the course of...
Okay, so that's the only time I'm going to advertise. I apologise for the shameful branding. These are the 5 things I think all CIOs, CISOs, and professionals should focus on. The first one, surprising for a vendor, I'm not telling you to buy lots of products and technology. It's about investing in your people and processes. You need to have a good mix of people, process, and technology to give good security. The second one is focus on the interactions between the user data and the app. Don't just focus on that endpoint. Security by design. Build it in, bake it in, understand your business, and use a language the business understands. Yeah? Let's not make it complex. Let's not lock things down. Make the assumption you're going to be breached. Yeah? If you make the assumption you're going to be breached, why don't you encrypt the data? Why don't you make it difficult? Because ultimately the bad guy's out to commoditize and they're out to sell something. And then the final one is cyber resilience. Practice it. I talk to CIOs and CISOs every day, and I say to them, have you got a cyber resilience plan? And they wheel out the disaster recovery plan. Very different things. Disaster recovery is all about getting your organization up and running as fast as possible. Cyber resilience is how can you run during that breach? Don't wait till you've been breached to practice it. The fire brigade or the emergency services, for example, are practiced. They don't come running onto site saying, there's a fire, although they might. Do the same in security. Make sure you've tested it. Make sure you understand what you need to do. Who do you communicate to? What do you say? What do you not say? If you look at some of the breaches over the last 12 to 18 months in the UK, we've done a pretty poor job of communicating externally, and the press love it. They've gone out and they've made us look idiots. Yeah? So let's get much better at practicing cyber security. Thank you very much indeed.
Do we have any questions?
None at all.
Yes, we have one.
The 84% figure for reach to the application layer, did that take into account the user as well?
It did, yeah. So that was looking across all of our clients globally. So there's 10,000 global organizations. We looked at user behavior. We looked at the application. And ultimately, the bad guy's after stealing something. They're after the data. So yes, that incorporated everything. Okay.
Yeah, question in the back.
Talking about people being a big part of it, how do you get wider organisations to adopt this methodology?
Great question. So I think one of the things is that the language you use, and it's building a culture in your organisation. It's not something you're going to do overnight. So if I put you back to when I was in the seat, I originally started working for the chief financial officer because IT was expensive, it didn't deliver what it wanted. So what I started to do was really look at how did technology can contribute, and the water cooler conversation was really important. Become bedfellows with everybody in the C-suite, so understand their organisation, understand the business, talk in a language that the business understands rather than technology. Talk about contribution, talk about margin. Once you start to do that, you start to build up some trust. Then what we did is we did a series of training which was personal to the individual. So if you think of awareness sessions, we're very good at talking about protecting the organisation, protecting the company's asset, but put it in the terms of that individual, their credit card, their children, their Facebook accounts. They can then personalise that, and we found that a really effective way of starting to build a culture, top down, bottom up. The CEO has to obviously support you, but actually we empowered individuals in the business to be the champions, as it were. Okay, does that answer your question? Thank you.
Yeah, second question in the back.
You spoke at the end about communicating about being breached. What would you say is a good way of doing that?
I don't think there's a single answer to that question, to be honest with you. I think obviously the new legislation is going to help because it's a pan-European legislation and it gives some guidelines around what's good and what's bad. But I think being transparent, arming your senior people with the right information. So I can't talk about any specifics, but let's say a large telecoms provider within the United Kingdom did quite a poor job first time the CEO went to the press. Because if you remember, they said, we've had a breach, but we don't know what's been stolen. And we don't know what the size of the problem is. So I think practicing and providing the right information, have proper analytics, trying to reduce the time to detect, trying to have a standard way of communicating with the press internally, but also your people inside. I think you need to be really transparent about it. Don't spoof the problem. If you don't know, say, I don't know, we're working on the problem, and as soon as we know, we'll provide you more information. Is a good way of doing it. So I think transparency, honesty, and finding out as quickly as you can to reduce that time that the bad guy is inside, I think is key.
Okay, we're just going to take one final question at the front.
Are there particular industry sectors that you think are poorly prepared?
Lots of them, yes. I think education, as I said to you, is one of them. I think critical national infrastructure is improving, but I don't think it's well prepared across Europe as a whole. So, I often speak in the Netherlands, in Germany, in France, in Sweden, and there's not a common way of describing a breach. So I think we need to get better at that. I think vendors in general aren't great at disclosing what vulnerabilities they have in their hardware. So they need to do a much better job of that. So I think, in short, no, but those are the ones I would cite this year.
Thank you very much indeed. Please give a round of applause. Thank you very much.